I feel very lucky to have this as a research focus, simply because I don't find too many people who, when I say that that's what I study, they go, oh, no, I'm not interested in that at all. Most people are interested in innovation. A lot of people are interested in psychology. I feel very fortunate that I didn't go into some sort of very technical field in biostatistics or the beating habits of some remote frog in some remote place. It's nice to be able to talk about my research to real people. And the thing that's interesting about innovation is that we often think of it as a very technological exercise. We think about the success of innovation as being driven by the success of the technology and the discovery. But really, when we think about markets as a whole, rather than, I find it very funny when you watch the news and they refer to markets. Markets did this, markets did that. Markets are just people. And they're people from a lot of different perspectives. So they're business people who are trying to make decisions that will benefit their firms and themselves. Oftentimes they are most motivated to make sure that those decisions work out in the short term versus the long term. There are consumers who want the best they can afford. I love, have you ever talked to consumers and said, what do you want? And they say quality. What do you mean by quality? I want the best. What's the best? I don't actually know. You tell me. So consumers sometimes, want the best, want quality, but they don't really know what that means. And they want to operate within the constraints of their budget, but sometimes they don't even know what those constraints are. And then you have swirling around in all of this are investors who are making decisions based on everything from utilitarian aspects of the decision to really intuition and their gut feeling. So the point of this is that innovation has as much to do with human psychology as it has to do with technological discovery. I think that there are times when the world has a great new discovery and it's going to happen whether people come along for the ride or not, but most of the time innovation and major changes in the world happen through human lenses. Now this is a very radical statement in my family. I come from a family of entirely engineers. I am the black sheep of my family. My father is quite disappointed in me that I'm a marketing professor. He's an engineer, my sister's an engineer, everybody I've ever known in my family is an engineer. But I have over the years won them over to this concept that even in highly technological fields, how people make decisions impacts the way things are built, constructed, designed, and ultimately succeed in the marketplace. And the thing that I study in marketing is a field called consumer behavior. And so this really is the psychological part of marketing. If you know much about the academic side of marketing, you know that there are basically two major fields within marketing. There is the quantitative side and the psychological side. The quantitative side comes out of economics. It's all about designing big formulas that will explain how markets act. And the psychological side is very much coming from a tradition of cognitive psychology, anthropology, social science, but also from economics and more recently from areas like neuroscience. So finally, it's kind of fun to feel a little more technical. I've started to do more neuroscience research in the last several years. So it's fun to go to the hospital, wear a white jacket, do serious things with serious brain pictures. But largely the thing that I really love about consumer behavior is that it is so interdisciplinary. It has so many different facets that it draws from. And let's just think about this for a moment, because I'm going to argue today that, hands down, consumer behavior is the most important topic in the business world today. That's my thesis for today. Now, if you're in finance, you're like, no, it's finance. And if you're in supply chain, you're like, no, it's supply chain. No, it's consumer behavior. I'm sorry, everyone's wrong. It's consumer behavior. But let me make a pitch for you. So let's think about consumer behavior and its interdisciplinary roots. So here's a kind of an ongoing innovation of our time. The original iPhone compared to its later iterations. Did anyone here buy the first iPhone? So we had one iPhone adopter. Anyone here buy later iterations of the iPhone? Okay. So we see a little bit more adoption. Does anyone here feel that an iPhone has not had major sort of saturation in the market? It's out. Now, the iPhone is a tool. Its adoption is largely, you could say, is largely a function of all the features that it offers. So what kinds of features does our iPhone offer? Siri. What's that? Siri, okay, so sort of a problem-solving arm to it. At its most basic function, what does it offer? Communication. Communication, right? We can make calls. We can check our email. I got here today largely because I was able to verbally tell my phone where I was trying to get to, and it found me a parking space 3 blocks away, which was great. But the phone has all these functions. And that is coming from that side of economics, that idea of utility. We're cognitive psychology, how we logically assess pros and cons. And yet, think back to when they first came out. When they first came out, my husband told me, when they made the announcement of when they were going to be released, he told me he wanted one, and I said, well, let's think about that. And he goes, oh, no, I really want one, and he told me all these great reasons why he wanted one. Then, when he actually got the phone, what was the first thing he did? He downloaded a lightsaber app. He downloaded an app that allowed him to make noise from Star Wars where they turn the light. Have you seen the lightsaber app? You swish your front and it goes boom, boom. And he's walking around the house, boom. Luke, I am your father. Boom. Then he showed me another app he downloaded where you could breathe on the phone like this, and it would make it fog up, and then you could write things on the phone in the fog. We had many weeks of these silly little apps, and I kept saying, where's the functionality? No, it's great otherwise. But he was more along the lines of this guy. So Apple literally, for the first people who bought the phones, set up rows of their employees to cheer as people bought their phones and took it home for the first time. This is not pure economics, right? This is not pure economics. This is emotion and excitement. It's something about our anthropological selves, about how we love things, and how we love toys, and how we get excited about community spirit. And so this is something that we can think about in innovation. It's not just about what attributes does your new product or service have. It's about the sense of how it can be exciting and how it can have this emotional aspect. Let's think about this. So here is a coffee cup. Now this is a branded cup of coffee. I have covered the brand logo though. I've covered 98% of the brand logo. Can you guess what the logo is? Do you have any doubts? All right. This is an amazing thing that Starbucks has done. Starbucks has literally so saturated the market, has so captured this domain in your mind, that when your brain sees that particular color of green and that particular shape, it can see just a sliver of the logo and say with confidence, there's a Starbucks. It means that if somebody's walking past you in the airport and their hand is over the cup and you see just a sliver of green, your brain goes, Starbucks, Starbucks, Starbucks. You can pass a billboard at 70 miles an hour and not even be paying attention to it, and that flash of green will go by and that little bit of a circle in your brain will go, Starbucks, Starbucks, Starbucks. This is an amazing thing from a cognitive psychology perspective. Starbucks owns a piece of your brain that is actually quite sizable. Neuroscientists are having a lot of fun actually finding out where these brands and images reside in your brain. Neuroscientists recently probably wasted their time, although it does have some scientific interest, determining the Jennifer Aniston cell. So they found the cell in people's brain that was devoted to knowing what Jennifer Aniston, the movie star, looks like. It's different. So Starbucks actually has real estate in your brain that they have captured over time. Let's think about this. Here is a pretty major innovation of plug-in electric vehicle. Oftentimes, if we think about why we might like these cars, what are some benefits of these cars? Why might one want to buy one?
Efficiency.
Okay, what's that?
It makes us feel good.
Okay, makes us feel good. What's another?
Park.
You want it easier to park. Okay, so it's small. What's kind of the major reason to buy a plug-in electrical vehicle though? It's not just about feeling good in parking. Yeah, you're saving money on gas, right? Like it's that idea that you're going to plug it in and it's going to be more sustainable. Now, if I decide to buy this car, should I care in any way whether other people are going to buy this car? Now, at first you might be like, no, don't care what other people think, just go with what you think. But no, this is a product and innovation that has a lot of network externalities associated with it. So network externalities are things where when other people adopt something, we get added benefits. So when other people adopt a plug-in electric vehicle, what are the benefits we accrue as another plug-in electric vehicle owner?
Availability of charging.
Yeah, the more of us there are, the more of these little charging stations that are going to be around, right? The more that we know that our governmental systems will provide either access to charging or access to parking, the more that retail space, and their range is 40 miles, you really need other people to adopt this. Just think about email. The very first adopter of email, what value do you get from it? 0, right? As soon as one other person adopts it, your value goes up. Now, it goes up more because then you can email more people, but that very first person, you someone else to email. So again, think of all these things like Twitter and Instagram. In themselves, without other people, they're valueless. So we really have to think of the societal movement of innovations. My name's Stacy, and Ashley told you a little bit about me, but let me give you a little bit about my background and tell you how I've come to love this area of research. I did actually all of my degrees from undergraduate through my PhD at the University of Florida, which makes me a really obnoxious Gator fan. I apologize for that up front. As you know from Gator athletics, we don't have a ton to brag about anymore, so we're pretty quiet. I used to be really obnoxious. Now I'm just sad. My other school, I went, my first job was at the University of South Carolina. I was a professor there for 12 years. I did my sabbaticals at MIT Sloan and at the Fuqua School of Business at Duke, and then moved in 2010 to NC State to be the Leonard Distinguished University Chair. I like to think of it as a global focus, largely because I think I mentioned that my dad's an engineer. He builds power plants, he builds them all around the world, so my family's lived in India, we've lived in China. We just love having that perspective. And one of the things that I've been most excited about since coming to State is founding and the sort of meteoric success of the Consumer Innovation Consortium, which I'll tell you a little bit about at the end of my talk. So that's who I am. But again, what is the one thing I want you to learn? And professor, this is in my mind a class. So what's the one thing I want you to learn? And that is, I want you, whenever you think of innovation, to think about consumer behavior. So while we all think of scientific discovery when we think of innovation, I want you to think of consumer behavior. And so I'm going to give you a brief taste of how consumer behavior impacts innovation using 4 what I think of as totally fascinating examples. Now you'll have to forgive me. In my family, we have a rule. My husband has a rule in which I am only allowed to talk about 2 studies per cocktail party. Because I find studies fascinating, and I find other people find them fascinating too. But he only says 2 per cocktail party. I think that's because he's heard them all. I'm going to give you 4 whole examples, and I bet, you email me later if it's not true, I bet that you will find yourself at the next cocktail party you are attending telling someone about these studies. It'll sound a little dorky, but don't worry, it'll sound well educated too, and you can tell them I'm an NC State alum. This is what we think about. All right, so let me give you some examples. The first 2 examples are very robust findings from the field of consumer behavior, and the second 2 are findings from my own research. So I'll kind of give you 2 from the field, and then 2 from my own. So the first one is the compromise effect. This is a decision heuristic that is absolutely fascinating. It impacts so much of how we make decisions about So let's think about what the compromise effect is, and I want to start off with an example. Now, one of the things I really love to do with my MBA classes is to send them an online survey before they even start the class. So when they're registered for the class, but they have not yet attended, I send them a survey. And embedded in that survey are a couple of questions about consumer decisions. And I say, yeah, just out of interest, tell me what you do in these decisions, in these scenarios. And the reason why I do this is because I find that a lot of students will say things like this. When I tell them about interesting phenomena from consumer behavior, they'll say something like, you know what, that's really interesting. And I can see how other people would do that. Because other people aren't really careful. Other people often, I can see how they'd be a little dumb or a little lax in their decision making. So I just like to have a couple things in the bag where I can pull out and be like, remember what you said in your survey? And show them how they felt prey to these same decision heuristics. So let's start with this one. So what I do is in the class survey, I say, imagine you're going over to a good friend's house for dinner. This is a casual dinner, nothing fancy. And so when you're getting ready to leave to go to their house, they can call you up and they say, hey, can you stop by the store on your way over and buy a jar of artichoke hearts? I'm making something, I forgot the artichoke hearts. Can you stop and get me a jar? And you say, fine. And everyone here, how many people would consider themselves not very knowledgeable about artichoke hearts and brands? Yeah, me too. Okay, so we all are kind of like, all right, fine, artichoke hearts, but you find them in the store, and here are the 3 brands that are available to you. There's a Polar brand for $1.79, Reese brand for $2.69, and Delalo for $3.49. They are all the same product. They're all exactly artichoke hearts in the same sort of rind, and they're the same size. And so I ask people, in this situation, what would you choose? So in your mind, if you were legitimately going to the store, what would you choose?
Excuse me, is
Yes.
the same amount of weight?
Yep, same amount of artichoke hearts. So the price is just literally a brand difference. So you're getting the same product, same amount. And so what most people you kind of have something in your brain? Okay. All right, so here's the choice share from my last semester's class. Does this surprise anybody? Did you find yourself liking that middle option a little bit yourself? It seems reasonable, right? So here's what the logic is that some people go, you know what, I don't care about artichoke hearts, I mean, it's the cheapest ones. Other people go, I'm going over to a friend's house, I gotta get them the nicest ones. But most people go, I don't really know what's a good artichoke heart. In my uncertainty, the middle option feels the safest. This is what's known as the compromise effect. And it is our human tendency to favor middle options. As humans, whenever we're given a range of options and there's ambiguity, like lemmings to the sea, we go straight for the middle. Think about all the ways in which we do that. If you were offered 3 different health insurance plans, a bare bones cheap plan, a medium amount of coverage, medium amount of cost plan, and a very expensive bells and whistles plan, if you can't predict your health in the next year, most people love that middle option, right? They go, oh, I don't want to be not covered, but I don't want to pay for something I'm not going to use. Middle option. So we do it with things as important as our healthcare. We do it as, with things as silly as the size of the drink you buy at the movies. How much Coca-Cola can I really drink in a 2-hour period? I don't know. There are 3 sizes. Middle. Now, it's a decision heuristic. It's a rule of thumb. It's something people use to make choices quickly, especially when they're uncertain. But the important thing to know about this is that it is actually not that illogical because it is based on our intuition of a normal distribution. So we're all familiar with this bell curve, right? We all know what a bell curve is. Middle ranges tend to be the most normal in any population. So whenever people see a range of options and they're uncertain, their thinking tends to go like this. I am normal. The middle is normal. I'm going to head toward the middle. Now, the interesting thing is that this tends to happen more when uncertainty is higher. So it tends to happen more with innovative situations and innovative products because, again, people are uncertain. But it also suggests that you can manipulate choice by manipulating the range of options. So let's go back to our set. Let's say that I work for this brand of law, and I want to increase my choice share. If you remember before, what was it, like around 20%? Yeah. So I'm working for the law. If I want to be a middle option, what can I do? Yeah, so I take my $3.49 price, right? And how far do I have to shift it?
$2.79.
Well, $2.79 is still going to put it above Greece. I'm not going to be the middle option yet.
But you only have to pay very little to be very close.
Yeah, but you really want to be middle, right? Like, you don't want to be right on the edge. So my first option is to have this move somewhere between 179 and 269. I'm the middle option. Now, that is, in essence, a terrible choice, right? Because you have just completely whittled down your margin. But you are the middle option, so if you sell 2 times as many archer cards, maybe financially that makes sense. What's another option we have? Yeah, let's do this. Okay, so here was our original choice here. Let's do this. Let's bring a premium product to market and price it at $4.99. We put a fancy label on it. We produce it. We don't even expect to sell it. But what happens is, in my class survey, half of my class saw this, and this was our choice share. The other half of the class was given the exact same scenario, but given this range. You want to see what happens to the Lalo's choice share? It's mammoth, right? I mean, if you're a brand manager and you make your choice share go from 22% to 41%, I mean, most executives here in the room would probably say that that's going to earn you a sizable bonus. Now, there's still 8% of the population that say, you know, I'm going to a friend's house, I'm getting the most expensive artichoke cards. But even in our own minds, look at how, when this was $3.49 that was the most expensive option, it felt expensive. The moment we see a $5 option, $3.49 seems suddenly downright reasonable. It is an amazing thing that when we have a range of options, middle options seem reasonable. So knowing that, we should try always to take whatever we want to sell and make sure it's a middle option. That means if you are a business who has, that offers ranges of consulting services and you offer packages to people, never go in and say, here's what I can do for you. Always go in and say, here's 3 options of what I can do for you. And make sure the middle one is the one you want them to choose. And the top option is something that seems expensive and maybe not with as much extra benefit. I'm afraid to say that restaurants do this to you all the time. Restaurants usually have something on the menu, like a surf and turf item, that they don't often even have lobster in the store for. But it is simply there to make their beef look reasonable. And so we're so set to have this compromise effect impact. So this is, this can be a very powerful thing. Now, this isn't just in how we make choices, but it's actually in how we perceive our own behavior in the world. Again, in my class survey, trying to give students a sense of this, I asked them a question. I said, every day, people waste little bits of time in their day by just being slow to get around to stuff, by unnecessary internet surfing. You do it at home, you do it at work. How much time do you waste every day? 3 hours. Lee just is like 3 hours. It's a gutsy call. Now, most of us, if you had to come up with a number in your head, it'd be hard, right? Like, you'd be thinking there, like, I don't know. I mean, I waste some time, I'm sure, but I don't really know how much I waste, and it probably changes class saw. Have the class saw a response scale like this. How much time do you waste a day? 0 to 30 minutes, 31 to 60 minutes, 61 to 90 minutes, 91 to 120 minutes, greater than 120 minutes. And so, what you might not be surprised now to know is that half the class, when they saw this response option, here was their spread. And what did they do? They said, I don't really know how much time I waste, but I'm normal. I'm not a robot moving from task to task. But neither am I a slacker who just sits on the couch and wastes the time away. The other half of the class, I gave them a different response scale. This was the response scale. 0 to 1 hour, 1 to 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours, greater than 4 hours. Now imagine that I am a public polling office and I'm working for a company that is trying to lobby the government to say that kids watch too much television. Which of these response, and I can use either one of these response scales for how much television do kids watch a day. Which one do I want to use? The second one. Let's say that I work for the TV industry and I want to show that kids don't watch too much television, that they're just fine. Yeah, I hope this makes you question everything you see in a survey from now on. Because sometimes I tell people when I do consulting work, I'm like, do you want me to find the for real answer, or do you have an answer you want to find? And I can find that answer you want to find, but I'm telling you right now, it's not legitimate. It's just a bias in how to ask the question. And that kind of makes people stop and think about what information they want and whether they want that information. So compromise effect really impacts us in big things and little things, just in how we perceive the world. The second example I want to give you is what's called the case versus base rate bias. Now, this is a bias because this is an inoptimal, suboptimal human tendency. And this is the tendency of people to pay more attention, be more persuaded by individual anecdotal data than by statistics that describe reality. So I think the most common example of this is people's persuasion by lottery tickets. Now, I'm not going to ask you if you've ever bought a lottery ticket because I don't want to know. The logical answer is no, none of us ever have. It's silly. But why would we be persuaded to do it? If we know our chances are 1 in 15 million and we have a sense of what 15 million really is, and that's a very large number, we would never waste our time or our money. But what happens is we're more persuaded by this anecdotal case, the picture of the people on the news getting the big check. This impacts us all over the place. I have to admit, if you have bought lottery tickets in the past and you are feeling bad about that, I'll admit mine, which is not lottery tickets, but I have a fear of flying. So even though I fly all over the world, I have a fear of flying, and I literally break out into sweat whenever I fly. And the thing is that whenever I tell people that, they go, you know, statistically, it's safer than driving your car. And I'm like, I know that. But I only have to see one crash on the news to totally override the statistics. Now, why is this? It's for a lot of reasons. We can kind of understand some of those reasons when we understand how marketers use it. So here's one of the best uses of the case versus base rate bias in advertising history. Are you guys familiar with this guy, Jared, who through eating at Subway lost 250 pounds? Now, Jared, when they first found him, he had these giant pants that he would wear and would bring out in the commercial to show that he was literally half the person that he had been. Subway sales doubled during the time that Jared has been a spokesperson. And once, in 2005, they went away from Jared, just thinking, okay, maybe people are done with the Jared thing now. No, they absolutely weren't. They love Jared. They love that sense of Subway is healthy. I might lose weight eating at Subway. Now, interestingly, legally, we have a need whenever we promise people results that are anecdotal to put a little asterisk by them. And what does that asterisk link to?
Disclaimer.
Well, a disclaimer. What is the disclaimer?
Results not typical.
Results not typical. So if you go to any kind of website like a Nutrisystem, which is for losing weight, or something that's about fitness or anything like that, they'll show you stories of people who have great success, and they'll always have a little asterisk by them, and the asterisk will then lead you to the text that says results not typical. Why are we still persuaded by a non-typical result? Well, one is that cases are narrative-based. They're based on stories, and that's how we as people communicate with one another. We love narratives. We love stories. We love protagonists. We love antagonists. And so when we have a story to share, we're very comfortable with that. Stories are evocative. They're memorable. We can easily share them around. We know stories. Numbers just sadly aren't as fun. So if you are the person at the cocktail party saying to people, hey, do you know what your odds are of winning the lottery? It's 1 in 15 million. Do you know how big 15 million is? Let me break it down. You won't be the popular person at the party. But if you tell a story about a lottery winner, it's suddenly so much more interesting, right? Now, this also plays into optimism bias. A lot of us, even when we see that result's not typical, we think to ourselves, well, Jared lost 250 pounds, I could lose 300. We do have that as well. But largely it's just a case that we love narratives. Now marketers are getting really good about this, especially in innovation. In innovation, one of the most powerful narratives is the origin story. And so you will find a lot of companies devoting lots of time to their origin story. And their origin story almost always involves a garage. Why?
Because it works for Microsoft.
Yeah, it works for one person.
And everybody has a garage.
Yeah, garages are very typical. In a way, it's kind of built into our Cinderella myth, right? We like people who go from nothing to something. You know, when March Madness rolls around, the sportscasters love to talk about the Cinderella team. We love the person who went from nothing to something. And a garage is our example of nothing. A garage is our example of it went from nothing to this large company. Now, what does it say if we want to promote entrepreneurs in this region? Well, the thing is that we have to understand the importance of inspiring stories. A lot of what we do has to be centered around how to tell the narrative of people who succeeded. Now, will they be typical entrepreneurs? No. Should we tell entrepreneurs the statistics of entrepreneurial success? No, we should bury those in the ground somewhere. But instead, we should talk about the success stories. We should highlight companies that have made it. And we should build a very careful narrative story that is, in essence, something that's easy to share. Not statistics, but protagonists, antagonists, challenges, and successes. The third example I want to give you comes from my own research. So I did some research not too long ago that ended up getting a lot of attention. And the title of the effect is the comfort food fallacy. So let's talk, though, about what lay theories of comfort food are. So someone give me a definition. What is comfort food? Yes, Mike.
Familiar tends to be high calories.
Yeah, familiar tends to be high calories, so some different people have different kinds of comfort food. It might be chocolate ice cream, it might be cookies, it might be meatloaf. In different cultures, it might be chana masala. Something that is very familiar. So think about what's comfort food here. We have what is called comfort food lay theory, which is that when everything's stressed around us, when everything's going chaotic, crazy, we embrace those familiar things as comforting and as reassuring. So when the world is in chaos, you want your mother's meatloaf. When the world is in chaos, you want your grandmother's fried chicken. When the world is in chaos, you want your auntie's chocolate chip cookies. And this is something that is a very common thought, that whenever we're in times of change, we embrace these little routine, familiar things. So I wondered about this a little bit, and so I did a set of studies in which I had people make choices between getting a prize pack that contained bags of Lay's, a very popular, well-known brand of potato chip in very common, well-known and beloved flavors, or a prize pack of a similar calorie, similar product, potato crisps, which is just what British call potato chips. You know, they call it chunk food, they call chips crisps, who knew? So they had an unfamiliar brand and unfamiliar flavors. If you travel to the UK a lot, eating potato chips is one of the great joys whenever I go there. I love all the different flavors. One that I really like is called camembert and plum. Who would think to put those flavors together? But they were offered these different price packs. The more familiar, the less familiar, same product pattern. Now, first I did a study in which I said, imagine that you have two friends. One friend is going through a period of a lot of upheaval right now. Another friend, everything's just same old, same. Which prize pack do you think they would choose? Your friend who's going through a time of upheaval and your friend who's very much in a constant period. And what we found is that when people predicted, they took their friend who was in a high state of upheaval, Taylor, and they said Taylor was much more likely to choose the Lay's, the familiar, over the unfamiliar McCoys. Their friend who was in a state of just everything same old, was much more likely to take the unfamiliar than the familiar. That was a prediction. And that's kind of how we feel about familiar things in times of change. However, when I did a choice study, when I actually asked people to choose the chips, and then later on, about an hour later, I asked them to rate how much upheaval was going on in their life, I found the exact opposite effect. When people were in a state of upheaval, they were much more likely to choose the unfamiliar option. When people were not in a state of upheaval, they were much more likely to choose the familiar. And again, this is so interesting because anytime people do exactly the opposite of what they predict that they would do, this is fascinating. Let's think about this though in terms of innovation. What does the comfort food fallacy have to say about information? And I think the thing here is that to remember this effect, just remember that word fallacy. We're wrong about how we feel about familiar things in times of change. We're wrong about it. We actually embrace different things in times of change. So what does that say about how we as innovators might use this finding? What are your thoughts? Yeah, say it a little louder.
Capturing customers, catching the time change.
Yeah, so if we want new customers, we need to look for people who are in a state of change. What are some common life changes that we might be able to identify from demographic information that's captured on almost any credit card or something like that? Moving. So moving.
Change.
Life event. Yeah, graduation, marriage, child. It's very interesting, but since this research has come out, Target actually got into a little bit of trouble because they were using their panel data, looking at people's purchases over time, and they had found an algorithm that could predict when women were pregnant long before they actually made it public through their purchasing behavior. And they were doing that because they were sending those people coupons for new products. Because they knew that was a time when they were probably not going to be really as brand loyal, when they were going to be kind of open to new things. And while it was very effective, and they were happy to do it when some reporter said, hey, is that really fair? The way they got into trouble is because they identified a woman who was pregnant, sent her a coupon pack. It included things for cribs and baby paraphernalia. And her father opened that piece of mail, and her father said, well, I was sending stuff about baby cribs to my 14-year-old daughter. And Target was like, ooh. Turns out she was pregnant. Their algorithm had worked. But then it was a little bit like, okay, this is maybe more disclosure. Then it gets into the legal ramifications of what they can't do. But interesting thing about it is that it's really true. When we are put into new situations, all of our habits are unchanged. So all of our habitual behavior changes. When I moved from South Carolina to North Carolina, we moved, my husband works in Chapel Hill, so we moved to Chapel Hill. And in Chapel Hill, I went to, there was no Publix grocery store. Now there's a Publix, and I could drive over to Cary. Trust me, I'm totally going to. I love grocery markets. But I had to find a new grocery store. And so one of the things that I used to make about once a week in my house, because my family lived in India, was chana masala. And so after we'd been in North Carolina about 6 months, my husband said, we've not had chana masala for dinner since we've been here. And I realized that what it was that I was in a new grocery store. Because I didn't know, like in the old Publix, I knew exactly what aisle the chickpeas and the tomatoes were on. Like I was just an automaton, right? I'm just putting stuff in my basket. In a new grocery store where I don't know, I'm having to look. And as I have to look, I'm seeing things. I'm going, oh, that sounds interesting. I've never cooked Thai food before. Okay, let's try that. And because I'm having to look, new options are presenting themselves to me. When we moved at that time too, my mother said to me, I told her that I wanted to start an exercise program, and I was going to join a gym, and she said, why don't, you've got a new house, new location, new job, why don't you just wait till things calm down before you take that other major life change? And I said, Mom, I'm going to send you my research paper, and I want you to read it and think about the advice you're offering me. Because in essence, that's bad advice, right? Like when I'm in that state of change, that's the best time to try and adopt healthy new changes. David Sedaris, the comedian, wrote a great book about how the only way he could stop smoking was to relocate to Japan. So he put himself in a totally different world, and he was able to break those habits. Because back in this familiar world, the habits were too strong. In the new world, the habits weren't as strong. So let's think about this for companies. Let's say you have a big company and you're going to institute a totally new HR system. And you're thinking about moving to another building. And so your executives are having that conversation of, we'll tell you what, let's move first, wait till everyone gets settled, and then institute the new HR system. This would argue that that maybe isn't the best thing, right? This would argue that when everyone's in a state of change, and they're going to have to change how they behave, move them to a new location, and embrace the new changes at the same time. So whether we want new consumers and we look for people who are in a state of change, or whether it's how we manage our own people, understanding this helps us have good advice. Don't space out the changes, bundle them together. And the final example I want to give you is, again, from a study that I did with Steve Heffler at Vanderbilt University, in which we wanted to see, was there any kind of social motivation for adopting high-tech products? So we've talked a little bit about whether we have iPhones or whether we have smartphones, whether we have tablets or smart pads. Do we get any social benefits from adopting our beloved high-tech gadgets? Is there some social reward to us? What do you think? Give me an example. Yeah, give me an example.
I think to keep up with people you have known for a long time, a lot more with technology, whereas you have to sort of that reach out, make that contact, that sense of somebody.
You can text them right that second. Yeah, so and then in a way, that's like a very utilitarian way that we have social benefit. So we can keep, because a lot of our tech gadgets are communication related, they help us communicate. Let's imagine a tech gadget that has nothing to do with communication. Let's imagine it's a very, very fancy coffee maker. The most high-tech coffee maker you can imagine.
Assuming that you are, that's you're emotionally invested in the research and why you purchase that facility and want to share that with your friends. And I'm assuming that it's a story. About how much you go through this process of so much.
Yeah, so you buy some new fancy gadget and you tell your friends about it, and it's a story to share, so maybe it makes a link. Do your friends think differently about you because you have that fancy gadget? They shouldn't. That would be very, very superficial of them if they did. But they do. Right? We are constantly making judgments about human perceptions through all the cues we get. So when we're in an airport and the person sits down next to us, and let's say we're a business traveler, we're traveling for business, we're thinking to ourselves, okay, I want to get through the line quickly, I'm a business traveler, I know about this, someone comes up, gets in front of the line right in front of me, and they're clearly in like sweats, and they've got their big duffel bag, and they look like a casual, social, infrequent traveler, and you're like, no, this person's going to be so slow. And then they pull out their extremely fancy technological gadget, and you're like, okay, wait a moment, maybe this person's, a little bit, maybe mine thought this was just some slack teenager, maybe they're an entrepreneur who owns a high-tech firm that I shouldn't sneer. We use these cues to make judgments. So just to try and see exactly what the impact might be, we took a situation that a lot of our students are very concerned about, and that is getting jobs. So we said, will your tech gadgets help you get a job? And so what we found is this. We did two different studies. We did one study that was a resume study, where all we did was we took HR recruiters and we sent them a resume and we said, can you evaluate this person for us and tell us how hireable you think they are, and rate them on a couple of dimensions. And the people, we had a couple different conditions. The resume was always exactly the same in the utilitarian information, where they went to school, what their GPA was, what work experience they had, everything that was sort of serious for that person. But at the very bottom, we had a little line that said personal interests. And their personal interests, again, were the exact same things, but they were either a little more tech-related or not. So in one case, the person described themselves as being the newsletter editor for their association of NACOOK, which was just a random acronym. But so for their national association, they were the newsletter editor. In the other condition, they were the weblog editor for their national association. So again, same thing about writing, same thing about being involved, but either newsletter or weblog. We found, and it was that resume study, it was very interesting. The other thing we did was we changed the name to be either, I think it was Jennifer and Jason. But anyway, a female name and a male name. So again, same credentials, just one little word changed to make you think that they were either more or less tech savvy, and either male or female. We did the same setup, same idea in a video study where we sent videos to HR recruiters, again saying, hey, here's one of our MBA students, can you evaluate them, let us know what you think, how they think they are. And they were going through an interview, it was a video of an interview with a recruiter. And again, we had in one video a male actor, another video we had a female actor. The response to everything was exactly the same. And the only thing that differed is that in one instance, the recruiter said to the person, can you send me such and such thing? And they said, it's a busy time, let me make a quick note so that I don't forget that. And they either pulled out a very lovely leather binder and wrote with a pen to make themselves a note, or they pulled out the latest, coolest little gadget with a stylus and wrote a note. And everything else about the video was exactly the same, just that one shot of what they pulled out to make the note, either a leather portfolio or a tablet. And here's what we found, is that when people did this, having that high-tech personal interest or that one shot of using a high-tech product rated our HR recruiters. These are professionals. These are people who rate people for their job. They do it all the time. They're experts. We saw a 27% increase in how innovative they thought the person was, and a 24% increase in how hireable they thought they were. When we did statistical analyses on these and looked at the other things we asked them to rate, we found out that it was totally driven by perceptions of leadership. When people used these gadgets or had more technological savvy, people thought they were leaders. They thought that this consumption of this product indicated a leadership tendency. But before you rush, gentlemen, I'm sorry, before you rush out and say that you're going to go get the latest greatest because it's going to help you in your career, the effect was minimal for men and giant for women. This large effect really only happened for women. So our female candidates who showed tech savvy had just huge increases in their perceived leadership, in their perceived innovativeness, and in their hiring. Why do you think it happened only for women?
Initial perceptions change.
Yeah, I think it is based on an initial stereotype that people hold that men are more tech savvy than women. So when you see a woman who's tech savvy, you have a bigger change of your initial expectation. And for men, more men are tech savvy, so it's not quite as surprising. To have it confirmed is nice, but it's not as surprising. To see a woman is very surprising. And since women sometimes aren't in leadership as much, then you say, okay, well, if she's an unusual woman in innovation, maybe she's an unusual woman too, in terms of how much of a leader she is. And so this was the effect of how there's this real social, but also, you might argue, economic benefit in using high-tech products. Yes.
Don't you think this is going to change the next generation of moms? All the kids, they are growing up with these in their hands. So I think in the future.
I dearly hope you are right. I dearly hope it. Well, because I do believe that this effect is based on stereotypes, and stereotypes are cultural, they shift over time. And that's a stereotype I really hope shifts over time. But it is interesting that it has been fairly ingrained for a long time. If you look at preponderances of CEOs of companies, governmental leaders, the next generation, the generation after, I feel like I've had a little social experiment of this myself in the last 8 months, that as a female faculty member, I'm usually treated with a lot of respect, but somehow having, being pregnant, it's sort of, people treat me differently. Like, suddenly it's not professor, it's woman. And so I wonder if there are also going to be times where, if we had female candidates, MBA students who were going out in the job market at a time when they happened to be pregnant, I would really look them up with technology. I'd be like, we're just slathering you with every high-tech thing we can think of, so that people's brains are pulled back from gender to a building. All right, so I really appreciate your attention, your interaction. Just to review, remember that consumer is shaped by the compromise effect, the case versus base rate bias, comfort food fallacy, and looking innovative motivations. These things will have social impact on whether innovations are adopted or not. I hope that you mentioned a couple of them at your next cocktail party. And I hope that, more importantly, the next time you think about innovation, you remember consumer behavior and how critical it is to facilitating